Good evening from Vietnam, Chris. Thank you so much for spending your afternoon on the Friday afternoon with our audience of the Inside Sharing Show and sharing your story with us. We really appreciate that.
It's a pleasure to be joining you and all your listeners in Vietnam and across the world.
Yeah, Chris, our program features about speakers, so we would want to understand the journey that make you who you are today. And I'm sure there's a lot of exciting things, a lot of good things that we can, learn, reflect, and grow from listening to what you share. So to start first, can you help us to do an honor things first? Here is introducing who you are and the what did you do?
Yeah, I mean, my name's Chris Roebuck, and I am a keynote speaker. I'm a writer. I am a consultant. I am a mentor, and all of those things, in their different ways and different channels, are designed to help people reach their full potential and the organizations they work for.
We heard a lot about you. You've been in many countries, giving a lot of speeches. You've been a lot on TVs. You wrote a lot of 5 books until now, right? And on leadership, right?
Yeah.
And we will learn the secret that making who you are. Allow us to bring you all the way back. So when we were young, the young version of Chris, what did he dream one day when you grow up, it will become?
I think the thing that I was potentially interested in was around, more than anything else, it was around, I suppose, design and engineering, and that sort of thing, where what you're doing is that you are creating something new and special. But it was so I was interested in those sort of scientific and engineering type things, but I was also interested in economics and business, and also in writing, because I think writing and communication are critical to everything, whether you're doing engineering or whether you're doing business. We're all human. You need to communicate in a way that's effective. So those were the sort of areas I covered at school. Then I went to university, and I studied economics at University College London, and that gave me that started my focus on the financial, the fact that if economies are going to work, if organizations are going to work, and even down to the level of people, we have to have income and expenditure that balances. So that gave me a sort of numeric foundation. And I then trained to be a chartered accountant for a few years, which enhanced that reputation. So there was that basic foundation of, I suppose, logical thinking that was focused on business, but also an artistic and creative element that was related to writing.
So how your journey to become an international keynote speakers became? How's that journey
Well, it was, as with life, it was a set of coincidences, set of circumstances, set of events that sends you into, I suppose, interesting directions, because the path through life is never straight. It's always going off the path you planned. So interestingly, when I was a chartered accountant, or training to be a chartered accountant, I actually took a decision based on friends of mine who were in the army to join the British military. And I went through the British Army's Officer Training College at Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst. And then I went out into the British Army as a military engineer officer. The work that I did as a military engineer officer in terms of my training was everything from the construction of roads and bridges, of water supply, of electrical supply, to the construction of bridges during combat operations. And then my deployments were around Germany, where I was in a very elite unit that provided essentially bridges, but bridges on tanks. So these bridges could be deployed right at the forward edge of the fighting. So it was a unit that was specialized. It was very, very fast moving because you're moving with armored formations. And the one thing that did was that taught me about, one, the fact that you have to be clear with people what you want them to do and why. Two, you have to be absolutely perfect on your timing. Three, that with good leadership and an inspired team, the team as a whole can achieve more than they as individuals ever thought possible. So that experience taught me about leadership and, above else, trust. That if people trust each other, they will succeed. After the army, I then worked with a lot of small and medium-sized organizations, entrepreneurs, helping them develop their leadership. So everything from, for example, small film companies in central London, to small retail organizations. And that gave me a real insight into the mind of the entrepreneur, the fact, the creativity of the entrepreneur, the fact that the entrepreneur starts with an idea, but nothing else. And how do you then, the entrepreneur then starts to grow their organization. But what then happens is, as they take on more people, then a little bit of their job is 90% entrepreneur, but 10% leader. And as the organization grows, it then becomes 20% leader, 30% leader. And the entrepreneur has to grow with that. And that was an amazing time helping small organizations grow. But then I went into the bigger corporate world. I did an MBA, and I went into my first role after the MBA was I was asked to go in and work with London Underground, the subway in London. And for various reasons, political reasons, the cost of running the London subway is high. And the system was really old, and it needed a lot of money, billions of dollars spending on it to make it work properly. And the government at the time decided that the best way to do this was, and this might sound mad, but that's what they thought, we will chop it up into 4 different parts. We will keep one part that runs the trains as public sector, and then the other 3 parts we will lease the infrastructure to, and they will maintain the infrastructure, and then it will all work beautifully together. But if your listeners think about, hang on, what are we doing here? We're taking an organization that has been one organization delivering 3 million passenger journeys a day for Londoners, and has been doing that for 50 years, and we are chopping it up into pieces. How are we going to make that work so that it is not a complete disaster? And my project there was to help create a partnership and collaborative environment where, even though 3 of the organizations were private sector driven by shareholder return and the other one was public sector, they all had to work seamlessly delivering people's journeys to work. So that was unionized, it was safety critical, it was involved with politics, because London Underground reported directly to the government. So it was probably one of the most, and the timeline on achieving this, which was a political timeline, not a project timeline, was just nuts. But it taught me so much about how you have to present a logical, credible case for change, which also answers the what's in it for me question, as well as what's it going to do for the organization. And that partnership is a mindset, just as much as what's written into an agreement. And then on to KPMG, setting up a business for them, helping them outsource some of their people for what was called the Big Bang in the City of London, the deregulation, to ensure that the people who were doing the money trading in the City of London actually had qualifications in each of the organizations to do the trading. Because the last thing you want is, if you deregulate a market, you want people who have neither the capability nor understanding to start dealing in millions of dollars. So that project was to make sure that people like Barclays Bank, UBS, Citigroup, etc., the people who were doing the dealing had detailed training records that we helped them put together that showed they had the capability to meet the requirements of the regulator. That led me on into HSBC's investment bank as head of leadership in there, dealing with HSBC globally in terms of their investment bank. But that was not only investment bank, it was also private bank. And many of your listeners who don't know banking will just think that all banks are the same. They're not. They're very, very different. So HSBC, as you know, is a global bank originally headquartered in Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation. Majority of their business is retail across the world, but they maintain an investment bank to service elements of their retail customer group. And I put in various things for them, from online performance management, succession planning. But the most important thing was, again, to try and get people to work together effectively. Then on to UBS, global head of leadership there. UBS was a brand new bank. UBS had only just been created. People think UBS has been there for years. 2002, it was new. It was mergers and acquisitions, 6 of them, that created a global bank that didn't exist before. The only problem was that the email systems didn't even talk to each other. So you can imagine you have a bank that is supposed to be a global bank, and you effectively have all these separate businesses: asset management, private banking, investment banking, Union Bank of Switzerland merging with Swiss Banking Corporation. And the email systems, as I said, they didn't even talk to each other. How can you create a global bank from that? But that's what we did. The board and we created a plan to make a global bank from nothing, to create a team of 500 leaders across the whole top of the bank who were aligned to the vision and values, who knew each other, who not only knew what their part of the bank did, but knew what other parts of the bank did, so they could offer the entire services of the bank to their customers and therefore make more money. The concept was one UBS. And within a corporate environment, that's tough because people think corporate. So linking to some of my work with entrepreneurs, we developed the concept of entrepreneurial leadership, so that people within the corporate world were starting to think a little bit like entrepreneurs might. So how do we, it's not a case of it's not my job, because we're all responsible to the client. Yep. It's the fact that change isn't something we should hate, it's something we should embrace. It's that everybody takes responsibility for what they do. It's that we don't complicate things, we try and keep things simple. What we do is we don't minimize risk, because if you minimize risk, nothing gets done. The secret is to optimize risk, understanding that you're in a business world, that you want every employee to be a brand ambassador, not just the people in the marketing function. You want everybody to take personal responsibility. You want everybody to grow and develop and help other people do the same. That's how small organizations survive. But that injected a massive amount of enthusiasm, and the financials rocketed up. 245% increase in profit in 2 years. The return on human capital went up, even though the headcount went down. and it's now a Harvard case study. And then into the UK National Health Service, dealing with hospitals, dealing with doctors, dealing with patients. 1.4 million people, but made up of 400 separate healthcare organizations. How can this massive organization even start to identify leaders? How can it start to develop leaders consistently so they can move around this system? Because, to be blunt, there is clear correlation between the quality of leadership within healthcare systems and patient mortality. So it's not like a bank and you lose a little bit of money. If your leadership isn't up to level in healthcare, people die. And so it was all of those journeys through all of those different experiences that taught me that there are some common factors for success. There are common factors around effective leadership, and that it doesn't matter if you're in the military, if you're in a small organization, if you're in a global bank, if you're running an underground system, or if you're in a healthcare system. There are consistent things that leaders can do to make people want to give their best, to focus that best on what the organization needs to make it successful. And that is my mission, because if that happens, there will be millions of people around this world who go to work because they have to go to work, because they don't have good leaders, whose lives can be changed by them having good leaders. So they want to go to work, so they are inspired at work. And when they are inspired at work, they go home happy. And if they go home happy, their families will be happy. And to take the words of Gary Ridge, the CEO of WD-40, if you have happy families, you have happy communities. And if you have happy communities, you have happy societies. And if there's one thing we need now, it's a happy world.
Yep. Chris, with that being said, with all the 30 years of experience accumulated back into your learning and all the lessons that taught you, right? And what is the common things that leaders can be doing so that create that kind of environment where people can be happily at work, happily at home, and happily to contribute to the society, though?
There are three things that I say that leaders should do. One is called the firm foundation, one is called get the best, and one is called focus it on to success. So
Firm foundation, get the best, and focus on what?
Focus on to success.
Focus on the success, yes. Can you share a little bit more about that? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started my journey on trying to speak to leaders across the world to help them be more successful, to inspire their people, I just used to say, get the best and then focus on to success. But one of the things that people kept saying is, look, I'm a leader. I don't have enough time. I have too many things to do. I can't focus on my people. Now, that's counterproductive, because if you don't focus on your people don't think you care about them. If they think you don't care about them, they're not going to work well for you. But so the firm foundation, it took me back to some studies I did in the early 2000s of leaders in London. And what I discovered was that very few leaders had been formally trained to do the key leadership actions that all leaders need to do. Prioritize. Am I doing the work that adds real value to the organization strategically? 2, time management. Am I getting things delivered on time? 3, delegation. Am I delegating effectively so I am able to do the work I need to do and other people are able to do the work they need to do? Communication. Am I explaining what needs to be done to everybody so it explains that, it gives them the big picture, which is the why, and I also tell them the what's in it for them, so it answers that question. And finally, it's feedback. Am I giving regular day-to-day feedback to help people understand how they are doing and how they can develop? Now, The studies showed that probably under 30% of leaders, other than time management, had been given those skills. So about 5-6 years ago, when I was speaking, I thought, I wonder if this might be a problem. So I said to the audience, tell me, how many of you in this audience at any point in time in your career have ever been given any training or development on how to delegate effectively? Please put your hands up. Less than 25% of the audience put their hands up. Every time I speak to a group of leaders, I still ask that question. And never in 5 years have I ever seen more than 20 to 25% of the hands go up. Sometimes in an audience of 500, it's about 6. But what does that mean for your viewers and listeners? What that means is that potentially 70% of them have also not been taught how to delegate. But what is a leader supposed to do day to day but delegate? So what I say is organizations need to make up that shortfall in the firm foundation. Because if you aren't able to delegate, it means you're doing too many jobs yourself. If you're doing too many jobs yourself, you don't have time to do other things. You're firefighting. And if you're firefighting, you're not spending your time on your people. If you delegate effectively, you have time for your people. And then that links into the second one, which is get the best. And everybody says, well, how do you get the best from people? And it's really interesting. There's research that shows how you get the best from people. But I thought, I won't tell people, because I believe that people know how to get the best from other people if they're a leader, because they've seen it happen in their own career. So I ask leaders when I speak every time this question: what did the best boss you ever had do on a day-to-day basis that made them so special to you? And why you gave super performance for that particular boss? I've been asking that question now for 10 years of every group of leaders I speak to. And you know what? It took a few months, but in the end, it's always the same list of 10 to 12 things. It doesn't matter whether you're investment bankers in New York, retail leaders from across the world in Rome, military officers at the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst. I did it with the executive committee of the Myanmar Red Cross in Myanmar. I did it with 50 senior leaders of the Chinese space program in Beijing. I've done it with oil company executives. I've done it with so many people in so many sectors. But Middle East, I did it in the Middle East with the UAE Prime Minister's office. It's always the same list. I know that it's going to be the same list so well that I asked the audience for these things their special boss did, and I flip chart them, and I actually have a slide ready. And when I press the button, I know that what is on my slide is going to be on the flip chart, and it always is. And it's simple stuff. It's show they genuinely cared about me, developed me, supported me and knew when I needed it, understood I made genuine mistakes, asked me for my ideas, built trust and transparency, acted with integrity, set realistic and challenging targets. Really, really simple day-to-day things that, one, don't cost any money to do more of. 2, are so simple because you're already doing them, so you know about them. And 3, there's no reason why you can't do more of it. And it's, I would say to all your viewers and listeners, just do this if you're a leader. Get a piece of paper and write down on it the answer to that question. What did the best boss I have do on a day-to-day basis that was special that other bosses didn't do? And if you write that list down, that made you give super performance. And strangely, because you're a human being, it will make other people do super performance, because it's based on what's happening in here. Because those simple actions act on our conscious and subconscious, and it produces an almost guaranteed positive response called reciprocation. And that's how we get the best. And then when we're getting the best, to focus it on success, we just need to tell people the big picture. Because the big picture is about strategic success. And we need to make sure that they understand that. So if they need to change plans, they're still focusing on the big picture, even if they do it a different way.
Wow. Chris, in the Get the Best, right? A lot of the leaders that you got a chance to talk to, when they wrote down the things like that, and you say that a lot of them, how can we help them to build from that simplicity? Because it sounds simple, but a lot of leaders not possessing that kind of traits, not demonstrates that things on a daily basis, and that led into the employees going to work, experiencing bad leaders, bad bosses, bad managers, going home not happy and creating something that's not happy along the way. So if we want to reverse engineer and change it, how can we help those successful leaders to realize differently, so that that the shortfall in what they're doing, that they need to change?
I think the problem is that too often leadership is made too complicated. It's not expressed in a way that shows leaders that it produces a benefit for them, it produces a benefit for the team, and it produces a benefit for the organization. Fundamentally, doing these things makes leaders' lives easier. And when you say to leaders, well, look, forget all the complicated leadership models you've ever seen. Just focus on what you know from your experience made you give super performance. And all you need to do is do those things. Now, what I also say is that you completely underestimate the power of those simple things. For example, corporate executive board data shows that a leader who asks their people for ideas can potentially get 35% more effort than a leader who just doesn't bother. Just showing you care as a leader can get 25% more effort. Now, we're not talking about, most leaders think, oh, if I do these things, I'll get 2, 3, 4, or 5% more effort. No, you're talking over 25%. If you're getting 25% more effort as a leader, how much better is your team going to perform? Because you're doing something that takes virtually no time at all. But then for the C-suite who are listening to this, what it does is, if you think, well, okay, so if that's what happens in a team, what happens if all the teams are doing this? Because what you can then get is you can then get roughly 30% more effort from 60% of people in your organization. And depending on your business model, and this should interest CFOs as well as CEOs, depending on your business model, you could, the figures suggest, potentially get up to 10% on your bottom line. But if you think back, we're doing things that are free. So for a CFO, you're getting 10% on bottom line without making an investment. It just happens. How good is that?
Wow.
So it's about leaders thinking practically. I can do just that list. If I do those things more of than I'm doing now, I will perform better, my people will perform better, and our organization will be more successful.
Chris, I have this question. I'm curious to know about this, because in the world where everywhere is now so complex, the consulting people come to organization with problems and then try to solve the problem for organization, and then try to make everything sound so complicated. On the other hand, you make things become a lot simpler for the people to realize, to structure the issue and then to fix it in a very simple way. How did you do that?
Well, I certainly, when I'm helping leaders around the world, talking to groups of leaders, another example, I spoke to the top 300 leaders of Huawei in Europe for 3 hours talking to them about how leadership is simple and powerful a few months ago. And I think the simple thing is that what you can say is that what consultancies will do is they will give you a sort of fairly complicated plan of a project. But I think often what they miss is, and I think this is an issue for project managers as well, because I was asked to speak at the Project Management Institute annual event to talk about how project managers can also be influencers and leaders to get things done on time. Because you can have the best plan in the world, the best strategy in the world, but if your people don't care, it's not going to happen. Okay, it might happen, but it's probably not going to happen very well. And I think the real difference is that my understanding has been really boosted. I did a 6-month part-time neuroscience course, and understanding the power of what is in here, because I knew from the military it was about trust. I knew from the military that you could have a great plan, but you needed to have people inspired to make it work. And I knew that it worked, but I didn't know why. And it was when I did the neuroscience, I started understanding why the things I saw working, or the things I saw that weren't working with bad leaders, why it happened. And it was the neuroscience that basically said that up here, we have that automatic system. It's not even a conscious decision. We have an automatic system up here that tells us how to behave. And if we hear something that we think is positive, it's good for us, it's coming from somebody we trust, it's coming from somebody we know who cares about us, our brain floods us with very positive chemicals, you know, serotonin and cortisol and all the rest of it. But equally, if somebody says something we don't like and we see something as threatening, we shut down. I mean, everybody viewing this will have had a moment in their life where their boss comes up to them and their boss says, I want to talk to you about this. And the boss goes on and on and on, and what you're hearing isn't really the full picture and it's unfair to you. Everybody knows that within 10 seconds of that starting, your brain closes down because you just don't want to hear it. And that is driven by this. And it's understanding the difference between a consultancy producing a big, good project plan and creating the mindset in people through leaders to want to make it happen. And I would honestly say to all C-suite out there, all organizations out there, you know, you need to think about helping your leaders understand psychology and neuroscience. Because once you understand about people, it doesn't matter which organization you're in. It's knowledge that you can use for the rest of your career. And it's knowledge that you can use outside work, because everybody else outside work are also people.
Yep. So every day we interact, we deal with people, and we know psychology and the real science. Yes. Then we be dealing better with the people, build better relationship, right? Chris, I want to look at your work experience. You've been successful in the military, then go into the business world, yes. Go into the government sectors, yes. And that's strange because you know, and every sector that you've been in, you've been successful. And in a normal way, people will stick in one industry and stick in for that long so that they can build, you know, their stories and their credential there. But then, how did you be able to success in the vast industry with different, you know, different spirit, different settings like that?
I think it goes back to some of the things I learned in the military. which are the simple principles. You have to have a good, practical plan to deliver what needs to be done, but also you have to build trust so people want to make it happen. And the more I went through those different environments, utilizing that basic concept of a good plan and building trust and inspiring people, I found that it worked everywhere. And yes, to be honest, it was a journey of discovery because I didn't know it was going to work everywhere. I just thought, well, it seemed to work in this environment and it seemed to work in that environment, so let's try it here. But then, as I said, as I went through the journey, I started thinking, well, this isn't about this job. This isn't about this organization. This isn't about because I'm at this level. This is actually about people. And then, as I said, I started learning a little bit about psychology and neuroscience before I did the course. And I started saying to myself, the reason it works is that there are common things we as human beings want. Let me give you an example. Let me give you a quote. Pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. Now, that is an amazing statement about employee engagement. And I ask people I'm speaking to, who do you think said that? And people will say, oh, Steve Jobs, Richard Branson. And I say, no, it's Aristotle, 500 BC. Now, you just think, hang on, that's 2,500 years ago. Pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. So perhaps, just perhaps, despite all the technology we have, despite the way the world has changed since ancient Greece, what is going on up here for us as human beings has not changed. We still want the same things from work as they did in ancient Greece. We still want to live a good, happy lives with our families and in our communities, because that's what being human is. And the more we understand that our work is laid across our humanity, not that our humanity is somehow an add-on to our work.
I see. Chris, I have the last question for you for today, and this is a question I ask every expert joining the show.
Yeah.
And your works require you to do a lot of thinking. And you mentioned about the thoughts and things that you learn a lot, right? So it forces you to think. And we believe now there's a lot of people out there, the ability to think is not increasing, but actually decreasing, unfortunately. So how do you do your thinking to help you expand it and nurture the thinking space?
Right. This is an interesting, because a lot of the stuff I'm speaking about now relates to the Great Resignation and what we learned from the Great Resignation, because that linked into remote working and is now moving into hybrid working. And what is interesting about that is that has shown quite clearly that thinking is not the same thing. There's different types of thinking, there's different types of working, and that the environments within which we do each of those are critical. And if we try and do the wrong type of thinking in the wrong environment, it doesn't go very well. And you know, just a quick aside on the Great Resignation, people talk about the Great Resignation being something special. No, the Great Resignation happened, because I speak on this, the Great Resignation happened because before the Great Resignation, we had issues in organizations about leadership, about culture, about decision making, and well-being. And what happened was in the COVID, everybody's lives changed. Everybody said, I've experienced COVID, life is too short, I want more from my job, I want more well-being. I want more time with my family. And I am not going to tolerate the poor leadership, too much work, and no career future that I put up with before. And nobody been able to move for 2 years. So suddenly everybody wants to move. So that's the Great Resignation. But the fundamental point about that is we haven't addressed those core problems still. And the hybrid working issue around which work you do where, the figures showed that where people were doing work that fundamentally was around concentration and self-focus, the performance levels in remote working were higher than they were in the office.
Oh.
Simple principle is, if you are concentrating on work and you are disturbed, it takes you 20 minutes to get back to the concentration level you were at.
Yes.
If you're in an office and you get disturbed twice, it's not good. So I learned that lesson. But if you need to brainstorm, if you need to collaborate with people, if you need to bounce ideas off each other, you need to be in the office. And that's why I say, in terms of hybrid working, you need to tailor it. Just saying 2 days in the office is fine for everybody isn't right. You need to tailor it to people. What does their job entail? What does their well-being entail? What does the team need to do? How long do they work individually? How long should they be in the team collaborating? And my lesson to myself has been, there are times and places to do work. Everybody listening knows your greatest ideas don't come when you're in the office or at work. Your greatest ideas come when you're sitting in the bath, when you're on your bicycle, when you're going for a walk, when, and this is what I learned, when your subconscious can talk to your conscious, because your conscious has the problem and the subconscious has everything you've ever seen. And when your conscious says, what have you seen over my life that might be the answer? You might not get an answer straight away, but you know as well as I do, at 3 o'clock in the morning, suddenly your brain will go, that's the answer. I found it. So that's what I try and do. Peace and quiet for creativity, for concentration, for thinking of new things. I like to get together with other experts, other people I know, to bounce ideas around about common subjects. And I love to mentor people, because then people are challenging me. So I would say to everybody listening, have quiet space for yourself, for your own well-being and mental health, to be creative and to think about things and concentrate on yourself, but also make sure you interact with other people. One of the things I say is everybody should go and find a mentor, because it's that interaction between two people that brings so much benefit. And the lesson that you learn is that you need both. So that's how I manage to do what I do. And that's how all of your listeners just take time to work out when is time for yourself and thinking and creativity, and when is time for collaboration, interaction, and challenge with other people.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and Chris, we really appreciate that. We really admire the work that you do, and now we understand the secret that making, you put the thinking into the work that you do, that leading to the success of who you are today.
Before we finish, let me actually read you the list of things. Yes. Set realistic and challenging targets. Made me part of a successful team with a good culture. Respected me as a person, as a professional. Backed me up when required. Developed my skills and my career. Acted with integrity. Led by example. Listened to what I said and asked for my ideas. Genuinely cared about me. Didn't blame me for genuine mistakes. Let me get on with things and didn't interfere. Was fair and treated me decently. Inspired me with their enthusiasm. Built trust and transparency. Praised and encouraged me when due. Had a sense of humor and laughed with us and celebrated success. That simple.
16 things that end the conversation today so beautifully. Thank you so much for sharing that list.
Yeah.
That if we can all apply to that, and then that will be so beautiful in our life and the lives of others. So, Chris, thank you so much. I hope that one day you'll be travel to my region, and we'll be able to take you out for
Absolutely, absolutely. One last thing, if people want to hear what successful leaders do to be successful, check it my podcast, www.perspectivesfromthetop.com. Leaders of all types, president of the International Committee of the Red Cross, ex-chairman of HSBC, Atlantic rowers, NASA scientists. Just check out the podcast, because there are so many ideas that you can implement that will make a difference to your leadership and your lives.
Thank you very much for sharing that. We definitely will check that, and we'll share with our communities also. Chris, you have a beautiful day, and
you
enjoy the weekend too. Okay.
I wish a great weekend to all your listeners, and I certainly look forward to hearing more of your great episodes, and at some point in time coming to Vietnam to speak.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm looking forward to that, Chris. Let's temporarily say goodbye for now. Okay.
Bye.
Have a beautiful weekend ahead. Bye bye.
Bye.